was one of his standouts today. It was Elijah and it was Azira. Oh, I messed that completely up. What's his first name?
And then the tight end that we were talking about, name's escaping me right now. Elijah.
Elijah.
Yeah, Elijah, dude.
Elijah, he cooking, dude. Tell us about Elijah, dog. Elijah A. Elijah tight end.
Oreo, bro.
Oreo, yo. I'm gonna leave all of this in there.
This
is content. This is good content.
Wait.
Elijah tight end, bro. Tell about Elijah tight end. So based on what he just said right there about Elijah tight end, I think we. Yeah, Oreo. Like Oreo.
That was my defensive standout, but my offensive standout was probably the guy that surprised me the most. That was Elijah Aurora, the tight end out of Miami, the Miami Hurricanes. He absolutely killed it through 3 days, but especially here when they were working in the end zone. Taylor was going to be the best tight end from a receiving standpoint coming out in the Senior Bowl, and Mason Taylor was good, but I would say he was the second best tight end.
Who's Hungies?
Dan?
Who's Hungies?
We are all Hungies, Dan. All right, well, thanks for ruining our video.
Who's Hungies?
Hopefully you enjoyed that little intro clip, but if you were asking yourself why was there no content after day 3's practice at the Senior Bowl like there was for day 1 and day 2, well, the answer is Dan Mitchell. So let's get right into it. The Senior Bowl game has just finished, and today we are here to dive into our standouts from that game. I'll try to keep this video a little bit on the shorter side, kind of fly through this a little bit. But yes, there was no content from the final day of Senior Bowl practice on YouTube or on X. If you don't follow me at DoseOfDion or you don't follow Roundtable Sports, you should follow both. But over there, we posted content throughout the week. We were at the Senior Bowl in person in Mobile, Alabama. My first time being there, and usually I use the Senior Bowl as an opportunity to learn about a lot of these guys, so it's pretty darn awesome to do that in person. We got some interviews that I'll be showing, but they're also already on social media. So it was fantastic. I was there with Colby, who represents the Patriots Global. I was there with Richie, who represents the Jets Media, and of course, Dan Mitchell, who represents the Bills. So if you guys want to check out any of those channels, definitely do that. But also, big shout out to them, man, because they invited me out for this, and I was fired up, and it was a lot of fun, man. And we got some really good content and clips like that. Some things that just aren't getting posted, and that's understandable, but other things that we did post. So you can go find that mainly on X, and I'll drip some of those things over here as well. But yes, because I didn't really have any takeaways from day 3, because, well, that video was real. That actually happened. I got to see the national practice that day. We actually didn't get to stay for the American practice side. Now, I did watch it afterwards. We all kind of watched it together afterwards on NFL Network, but we weren't actually there in person, so that's another part of this as well. However, we just got done with the game of the Senior Bowl, and I think that some of the players that stood out during the Senior Bowl also stood out specifically on day 3 and the final day of practice at the Senior Bowl. So I just want to touch on guys that stood out from the game specifically, and then if anything overlaps from the last day of practice, I may mention that as well as we go through this. Let's get right into it with Darius Alexander, who got things started with a nice tackle for loss on a swim move. And Darius Alexander literally just posted the video, so it's fantastic to start here. He had a lot of wins in this game specifically that didn't even turn into sacks, but he just had wins over the guard position. He was pretty consistent, and I think Darius Alexander, as the week has gone on, I've liked it more and more and more of what he's able to bring to the table, his ability to win as a pass rusher. I think even Daniel Jeremiah pointed out he thinks he's like a roughly a top 50 type of player. If you want to see where I'm at with him, that video is out, but I think there's so much upside in this player, and I think that even just this week of practice showed that kind of upside. By the time you get to the game, he looks really good in so many different spots on the D-line. Yes, he's built to play in the interior. He's kind of built to play as your pass rushing defensive tackle, but he does have a ton of flexibility. However, I think he's put the defensive tackle resume really together by the time we got to this end of the week, and he stood out early in this game. Another guy that kind of fits into a similar category, Savion Jones, who huge fan of. I became a huge fan right before the first Senior Bowl practice started. We were there the day before, and we were watching prospects, and I got to Savion Jones, and I was like, who is this guy? He grew on me very fast, a guy that's 290 pounds with the kind of length that he carries, and also being that athletic. Being able to play as a defensive end, it stood out immediately. Like, there's something here. It doesn't always look crisp, but there's really something here to get after the quarterback. And then by the time we get to the end of the Senior Bowl, we get to the game, he's making flash plays, and it was really a kind of a slow build here for me once it got to Senior Bowl practices. It was the first time I really noticed him step in the defensive tackle, and he handled it at defensive tackle. He got to run stuff immediately when he stepped in over a guard. Wanted to see that flexibility play out, see if Savion Jones could truly bring that to the table, bring that kind of flexibility, and he did it against the run. saw that more and more. And then we get to this game and we get a tackle for loss, gets behind the line of scrimmage, and that's kind of just where he lived. That truly has inside-outside flexibility, I think, much more naturally here. He's more so probably built for like a big DN type of role, but he had success when he stepped inside as well. I think Savion Jones is going to be one of those really interesting names to watch. I still got to do my breakdown on him, see where the polish is truly at, because that feels like it's going to be the question. But in terms of measurables and athleticism, it's pretty special what I think he can bring to the table. Linebacker position, I think there was different guys at different times that stood out. You know, we had Demetrius Knight, who I think is going to be one of the higher linebackers taken in this year's draft. I started watching him and doing some of his film today. That is a very fun linebacker to watch. He's a very good blitzer, and we got to see that today as well. Alex Shamar James specifically really stood out today, having good coverage the first time around in what should have been an interception. Mondon, who was trailing off the backside and overlapped his coverage to get himself into his spot. Shamar James also showed up in the run game as well. I think this linebacker unit really grew as well as the week kind of went on in terms of the playmaking that they brought. There's a lot of guys that can work in coverage specifically, but you really got to kind of sort out the players and what they were really good at. Like we saw Kaiser playing safety in this game, the linebacker out of Notre Dame, who, while maybe athletically in terms of quickness doesn't match up the same with everybody else, there's so much fluidity within his game, and I think Shamar James put on maybe the best show at the linebacker position specifically in this game. Another guy, especially on day 3, that I noted multiple times was Jonas Sanker, the safety out of Virginia. He ends up having a really nice run stop. That's actually where I noted it multiple times, was what he did against the run, so that one made a ton of sense. Tesla put together a very strong showing here, being in the Senior Bowl game. I mean, the receivers really showed up in this game specifically. It was interesting because the day 3, I was really excited to watch the defensive backs. I thought the receivers, for the most part, were pretty dominant, at least on the national side. And I thought in this game, the receivers all kind of showed up. Obviously, we saw what Betch did. It was awesome for him to have that walk-off game winner. But Isaac Tesla, specifically, multiple wins in this game. He was a vertical presence in the slot. He was a big body that was separating at the top of the routes well. I had him with a deep curl early in this game that created separation. I thought he had a fantastic showing. I think the wide receiver position as a whole really came into form by the time we got to the end of the week specifically. Maybe some of that is also timing with the quarterbacks as well, because there were throws, even when you go through red zone drills, where someone would separate and the ball was just not even in the same vicinity of where the receiver is going to be. So you understand why that takes a little while. Guys like Jalen Lane, I thought as the week got on, better and better. By the time we got to day 3, I thought Jalen Lane was a standout offensively. Now, in fairness here, he's working against Porter, which struggled a little bit with some of this in terms of the quickness off the ball, but he gave me some Khalif Raymond vibes with this release type, with the skip and then working himself vertical in the finish with the hands. Speaking of guys that were productive, Logan Brown, the offensive tackle out of Kansas, he ends up springing a big run, gets out in space, finishes his block. Logan Brown was kind of those players that just every once in a while would make note of it. Like, that was really good. He matched up against a really good pass rusher, and he handled his own. And shout out to Thomas Christopher for getting this interview. I didn't realize that he was a type 1 diabetic like myself, so I thought this was pretty fantastic with this answer.
Under control. I think a big point of that is diet and nutrition. I think it's really important to have a very consistent diet, have a good routine, and I mean, that's worked for me, and I would hope it would work for others.
Junior Tafuna, I think it was after day 2, I noted Junior Tafuna multiple times. We did a live stream on Roundtable Sports, and it was like, man, he showed his power. He's a little bit undersized, but he's able to win the leverage battle consistently, so he plays into that. But then also, you got to see like the spin move, and you're like, okay, there's some real athleticism here. And then you get into a game like this, and Tafuna was effective once again. I think really towards the end of the week, he made a really strong push. At least for me, I didn't know who he was coming into this, so by the time we got to the final day of practice, starts popping up here and there, and you're starting to see him a lot in the notes, and then by the time we get to the game day, he's making plays as well. We end up getting a sack here. And this rep was against my guy Caleb Rogers, and you get to see him win the leverage battle, and you look at the leg drive once he gets inside the pads. Dash with a fantastic flea flicker grab over the middle of the field, contested heavily. I mean, this past season, he went over 1,000 yards receiving for TCU, and in recent years, they put out a lot of talent out of TCU at the receiver position, especially those bigger body receivers. I thought he played into that really well today, but specifically, he opened up the route tree a little bit. He had some underneath separation. He had a little hitch route that he hit. He had an out route towards the sideline that he connected on. I thought he opened up everything, kind of brought that all to the table. We've seen the physicality, the catch point success, the 50-50 balls, the contested grabs, but he opened up the route tree. I thought specifically in this game, had a ton of success, and of course at the end of the game, ran the beneath route, made the grab from Hennigan, who played, I thought, fantastic. I thought Hennigan had just such an amazing stretch towards the end of the game to lead the American side to the win. It was just an outstanding drive toward the end. Speaking of the quarterback situation, Jackson Dart, when we did get to see him, capitalized well in the red zone. He used his legs multiple times. One was called back for a holding call. And I thought at one point with Jackson Dart, he was holding the ball too long in these red zone drills. So using his legs to open it up, we saw some really good vertical push throws. Ray Zabel, who has been, I think, the best offensive lineman all week. I think he won the award for like the best best player throughout the week of practice. Gray Zabel's been fantastic. I remember when I first watched him out of North Dakota State, it was like, okay, that looks like a guard. Like, the skill set looks like it's going to translate to guard. Well, hey, forget that. This guy literally plays everywhere. I mean, he was playing center by the time we got to the end of this game. Gray Zabel, to me, had been the most consistent when you got to one-on-one reps, the consistency at which he would win, and he would win early and just not give it any kind of airspace. And whenever Gray Zabel was beat, you're like, that was pretty great. Who was that guy that beat him? I got to circle that player. And he did have his losses, but again, he showed up in this game effective. Moved to the center position. I don't think his reps at center were fantastic from what I had seen, but his ability to literally play everywhere on the offensive line, I thought he looked really good at guard, and that I think he just has a skill set for an interior offensive lineman, even if he's not naturally built like you would think of an interior offensive lineman. Princely, as they pronounced his name, just forget the last name, say the first name twice. I think that's the way I'm going to do it too. Y'all saw the opening clip, but Princely, he was a guy that had a really nice win in this game on Connerly. I thought Princely was a little bit quieter in terms of the production that he was consistently putting out there in the one-on-one drills, but we know how talented this player is. I mean, coming into the year, I was pumped up for Princely because I knew about him the year before, going to Ole Miss. I was fired up to see what that was going to turn into, and I thought it was kind of slow in terms of production for the expectation, but in this game, he was very effective, and the win over Connerly, I think, was kind of the circle to everything. It led to the pass breakup by Ransaw out of Tulane, who is another guy that, as the week kind of went on, started to pop a little bit more. And speaking about throwing late into the red zone, we get a cover 3 look here, and this was Ransaw's interception at free safety. Read the quarterback's eyes really well, and then I love how he finishes the rep, trying to get as many yards as possible. Was beat a couple times in the red zone as well, gave a touchdown, gave the 2-point conversion to running these stacks and rub routes, and really nobody seemed to have a great answer for the stacks and rub routes at any point during the Senior Bowl practice or game. Nobody really seemed to have a great plan to deal with that. Understandably so, it's much more vanilla on the defensive side. In terms of safeties that stepped up in coverage, I got to give credit to Castro. I mean, you go back to day 3, he got beat by Oregon's tight end, just absolutely cooked one-on-one. You get to this game, and he looked fantastic in coverage consistently over and over. He's always been a very good run support type of piece out of Iowa, but in this game, he shined as a pass coverage piece, specifically when he was in those one-on-one situations. He had a pass, a vertical push, a little fade route, or like a go ball that they threw to Jalen Royals. He was all over it. It was an incomplete pass. I mean, it was fantastic coverage, and that's the real vertical threat in Jalen Royals, who had been fantastic all week. You know, that's what Castro brought. Castro had, I think, one of the strongest performances in terms of what the expectation was. Speaking of guys that just took off as the week went on, Oladejo out of UCLA. Again, I didn't know who he was, and I can remember by the time we got to the 3rd day, it was day 2, I made a couple of notes of him, and I was like, okay, Oladejo had a little bit of stretch there. He's a nice little pass rusher. He had a little more of a finesse style to his game. He kind of dip, bend, turn the corner. You saw some of that one-on-one, and then by the time we got to day 3, I kept taking notes of him, and I ended up talking to Brochmo, and I was like, man, this Oladejo guy, I'm like, what do you know about this guy? I mean, this dude looks fantastic. And then you get to the game, and you could just see it pop off the screen. The get-off was nasty. The first time I noticed him, he didn't even make a play. It was just to get off the ball as a stand-up edge rusher. I mean, he just shot out a cannon, and then he continued, and I went back through my notes, and I'm like, man, I noted him multiple times against the run, too, so as much as maybe I visually thought of him as like this pure pass rusher, he was making plays against the run. I think he had the most dominant stretches maybe of anybody in this entire week outside of what we saw from Walker at the beginning of the Senior Bowl in day 1. What we saw there, that was super dominant. That kind of carried over into day 2 as well, just had dominant stretches. As an edge rusher, though, this was one of the most dominant players. He had the one where he ends up getting a sack. He beats the split zone block immediately. He was also working with Landon Jackson, who, just like day 3, also took off as the day kind of went on. And you can see some of the stiffness and playing a little bit upright early in the week, but this was a really nice way to kind of win with that. I mean, you see the ankle flexion, you get the skip move with the club attached with a little outside hand swipe to add to it. This was a pretty rep to get an offensive tackle to settle inside and then turn that corner tightly with that ankle flexion. Landon Jackson toward the end, because day 3 they were really working like heavy red zone drills, and then they would just kind of move where the ball was being spotted. But in day 3, it was towards the end of practice, he had like back-to-back wins, back-to-back rep wins as a pass rusher, back-to-back plays, and it was like that was the first time I really felt that huge presence from Landon Jackson. Well, he carried it over, and he had back-to-back plays again in this game. He ends up getting a sack, then Landon Jackson comes back with a strip sack. That was on Vincent, who was playing left tackle, who maybe had a little bit of a rough day. I thought Vincent did some good things at left tackle this week for sure. Ends up also getting called for a false start in this game as well. He finished very strong to the Senior Bowl week as a whole. How about my man R.J. Harvey? I had him as a top 5 running back when we initially did our top 5 backs. Dude throws a touchdown today. R.J. Harvey surprised me a lot during the week because as a route runner, he looked very fluid. I don't think he's going to have super high upside as a separator, but he looked very smooth and fluid, really nice hands. He felt very reliable in the pass game, specifically as a target. But then also as a runner, that's where I obviously really like him. I love the foundation he plays with. I love how low he plays. I just like the pace from R.J. Harvey. And that's why I was a big fan of him. He gave me vibes of kind of like how DeAndre Swift plays. I'm still kind of sticking to that comparison. That's just the vibes that I get. But then in the pass game, he made a massive impact. And I didn't know he was going to make impacts at throwing touchdowns, but that's also what he did today as well. David Walker out of Central Arkansas came up with 2 sacks in this game, one of them on Clay Webb, who I just thought had a rough kind of week as a whole. Now, in fairness, I don't have like the most deep breakdown on the offensive lineman. Again, for a lot of these guys, it's kind of my first time seeing them as we're getting into this, and I'm going to try to pick it up fast. But it's also the aspect of, like, there's a lot of things that you just miss. But Clay Webb was kind of one of those guys that popped up a lot within my notes of having some losses here and there. He was the guy that consistently kind of popped up there. I know he also had a penalty towards the end. He had a bad false start to start a drive. Fannin came to life as the week went on. We got to day 3, and Fannin, I thought, looked the best that he did. Day 2, I thought it was a massive step forward because it was like, that looks like the explosive receiver, you know, that he's capable of, right? He's a guy that can absolutely go. And we saw him lean into that explosiveness and, like, I'm a dynamic athlete. Let me be that kind of piece in the passing game. And we also got the interview with him as well as Darius Stewart. We got an interview with him, and he kind of talked about that, you know, kind of settling in. And Harold Fannin, again, in this game, it was 2 like beneath routes, 2 little flats, but you saw the run after catch, nearly scored a touchdown one. You got to see the juice that he brought to the table. But I thought, again, by the time you got to the final day, Fannin really took off. I think that feels like the case with a lot of these receivers, but Fannin's route running, I thought, was really crisp. It was a guy that, again, leaned into, like, I'm going to be explosive. I'm going to really have to make a hard sell at the top of my route, and it's going to be tough to stick with me. And I thought Fannin kind of built on that as the week went on. But getting back to defensive line, Savion Jones assist on a sack for Princely. Again, Savion Jones just continues to flash. He was a flash player all week. From day one, from the first time I saw his film, he's been a flash player. Pat Bryant hit the big vertical shot, which was honestly a beautiful pass. Demetrius Knight ended up missing a sack in this game, but I think Demetrius Knight feels like he's going to have a lot of upside as a blitzer. First off, he is sudden. He's as sudden as they get in terms of stop to start. He also has a really nice change of direction ability because he can slam on the brakes in a hurry, and you see it kind of in coverage. It's the way that he's just able to kind of work himself downhill in coverage and zone coverage, kind of work down through different levels. You see that real suddenness, the click and close ability for a linebacker to just see ball, get ball as a blitzer, and then also the length that he carries. I mean, those things were dangling down to his knees. You know, when we saw him in person, I was like, that looks crazy. And he ended up missing a sack in this game, which isn't fantastic, but I think that's an area he's going to bring. It's understandable why he's really well liked as we head into kind of this full-on draft process. A guy that I want to mention that I think has been under the radar the last couple of days, and I've had in my notes, never brought him up. It was Yaya out of Iowa. I brought him up. I had him multiple times in my notes, but it was never enough for me. Like, I got to put this guy stand out. And I don't know that this game was either, but I still noticed him. Like, at the point of attack, being successful against the run. I noticed a little bit of juice off the backside against the run. No really real standout plays from him yet. Kind of finding a way to make his presence felt. And I don't think he's also playing a position that's typically going to make your presence felt. And I don't know that's going to be his role in the NFL from what I had seen so far. But at this point, he kind of came along. A people mover that I was really excited about was Caleb Rogers out of Texas Tech. Another guy I'm excited to watch playing that right guard position. Had a really nice block today specifically. And I thought Caleb Rogers, again, towards the end, getting more familiar with these guys. Caleb Rogers popped up multiple times, and it was constantly the same reason. People mover against the run, finisher against the run. There was some nastiness there. He carried the seal block. I give a shot to Ja Joyner. All right, it was like a funny background story when we were watching Ja Joyner because it was like, yo, who is this guy? He's not listed on anything. Is he an undrafted guy? But I was like, the more I watched him, I'm like, yo, Ja Joyner looks like he's got some game. And I got to be honest, Ja Joyner showed that throughout the week of practice. I mean, it wasn't as consistent.
And I thought a rep like this really encapsulated what he brought to the table. I mean, this was a guy that had an ability to consistently get underneath pads as a defensive lineman. He created torque on the edge. He usually found a path to the quarterback that pressed tackles pretty aggressively. The get off wasn't fantastic, but there was some really strong ankles that continued to allow him to work and set up these second effort and third effort wins.
And some of the others, but Ja Joyner every day of practice would give you something. You're like, okay, I see you, Ja Joyner. And again, in this game, he ends up getting a sack and a tackle for loss, a sack on a boot play where he doesn't bite on it at all. He just kind of steps right in front of the quarterback. But for the most part, like, Ja Joyner had those plays every single day of practice. Jarquez Hunter, I think they pronounced a J in his name, the Auburn running back. This was a guy that was kind of an honorable mention for me when we did our top 5 running backs. Like, he was right on the outside. I thought he had one of the best plays of the day. I mean, we got to see multiple good running backs. I think there were some really good running backs. I like Neal a lot out of Kansas. Of course, Trevor Etienne I thought was a really nice pass catcher. Donovan Edwards showed that ability as, like, I can really route run. It's just like, let's get the rest of the stuff kind of dialed in, as well as pass protection there. Now, there was some breakdowns, like Ollie Gordon and pass pro looked kind of ugly at times, but there were some really good running backs at this. You also had Delaware's running back Yarns, who just flew, and he had some really nice runs as well, because if you misplaced your gap, he was just going to take off. But I think Jarquez Hunter, getting to see him in the Senior Bowl game specifically, that he had one of the best reps of at any point. I mean, he broke 2 tackles, which you don't really get to see as much when they go live, really in the Senior Bowl practices. Broke 2 tackles on a little run after catch opportunity. I think Jarquez Hunter could be one of the more well-rounded running backs coming out this year. pretty excited about where he's going to end up. Hennigan was just delivering dimes. I like how fast Hennigan processes things. That was noticeable the first day we were there. It's like it's day one. He's taking really quick reads. And even though some were great, I remember there was like a cover 3 because they were playing those vanilla coverages, so you could kind of tell what it was. It was like a cover 3, and they were running like a deep corner route. Yet he threw it early, and he threw it inside. And it was like, okay, in theory, that could make sense because if like, hey, the receiver doesn't get into the corner, he could catch that. But it really wasn't open. I mean, it was plastered completely. The guy sitting outside leverage, but it was decisiveness, just like I'm letting that thing rip. And I thought that carried over. By the time we got to day 3, I thought he was just playing really fast as a quarterback. We saw him throw a really great go ball. He threw a couple of those. I give Jonah some love here as well. This guy's played up and down the line a little bit, playing some right tackle in this game. And Jonah Savania, I think that's how you say his name, out of Arizona, really well regarded coming into the season. And then after the season, I think that's dipped a little bit. I don't think he had the best Senior Bowl practices, but from an athletic standpoint and a versatility at a guy that weighs like 339, it's impressive as heck. And there were reps today where you could see his ability to really just kind of turn the corner with an edge rusher. It just shut the tap water off, and it was outstandingly impressive. And especially when he was able to get out in space and lead blocks at the second level. That dude is a real athlete. That dude had position flexibility upside, and he's got a lot of size. I think Jonah's going to be one of the more interesting picks this year, depending on where he ends up going, because again, there's a lot of love for him early. Maybe some of that fell off a little bit, but the athleticism to his size is still there for sure. See Oben get going a little bit. He had a nice little run stuff, beat Bartholomew, the tight end out of Pittsburgh, towards the end. The 2-play sequence, which I love, because again, this kind of felt like Tim Smith all week. I thought he was one of the more under the radar players. I think I brought it up after day 2 that I thought he was one of the more under radar players, and then I think that carried over. I think Tim Smith got super overlooked because of what Walker did early, because of what the interior defensive line were doing, and how many defensive line were fantastic this week, that a guy like Tim Smith kind of threw under the radar. And that's someone I'm excited to watch because he has the body composition to handle multiple gaps as a run defender. That's kind of his play style. And again, maybe not in the best spot, kind of like Yaya to make a ton of plays, but athletically, he showed flashes of like, that looks pretty amazing. Like he had spin move wins, and then he got to today, and there was a push that he transitioned into a counter spin move, just a play that Dan Jackson ended up getting the PPU, so that gets focused. I saw that, and I was like, whoa, that kind of stood out. That was super athletic. That's the Tim Smith. That's the guy that I was excited about. He comes back, and he gets a really nice run stuff like 2 yards down the field where it looked like it was going to spring, and he just shut it down immediately on the play through a block, stack, and shed. So Tim Smith, one of the guys I'm really circling as a potential under the radar interior defensive lineman. Then you get back to Oladejo, and again, he gets a sack, he gets a pressure. Castro shuts down a 4th down and 4 scramble to just add on top of what he was doing in coverage. They get to cover 3. He's playing out in underneath zone.
So Sebastian, there is no question that you're an absolute dog in run defense, stack in the box. But what exactly would you like to let NFL teams know about your abilities in coverage and what you could bring to the table?
Yeah, I think I excel in the zone game. The man game, I haven't been. It's not like first nature for say. I play a lot of zone. I would much rather live in that world where I feel like you get more picks in zone coverage. You're able to read the quarterback and just feel the whole picture develop.
Gets off the receiver, makes a play, shuts it down on a 4th down and 4. That's kind of what he's known for. It was a fantastic play. Castro had a consideration to be like, yo, I was the MVP of this game. Shamar James, again, had a really nice stop. They tried a toss play. He gets to stop. That may have been the play where Knight also got sealed up kind of at the second level, which I didn't love. He got off the block. He pretty much gets off blocks pretty well, but he did get sealed up because he tends to play a little bit like I'm not moving until I see it, which is not always great. He can be a little bit slow to get going, but Shamar James was not. Shamar James went out there and made the play, and then Kaiser had a fantastic pass break up on a 4th down and 1 that was thrown underneath. Just unfortunate that defensively there was a penalty which extended the drive, but it was an amazing play for a guy that was playing safety in the second half according to their head coach. And that Tim Smith run stop I talked about, I believe that Tim Smith one was like a wham run. It may have been a trap. I think it was like a wham run, but he was on the backside, so his stop was massive because there was a gaping lane back towards where the wham block took place, but off the backside he ends up making the tackle, so it was massive that he made that play. Oben gets another run stop on a 4th down and 2, which just looked like a complete broken run play, but either way it was a stop. And then you get to that final drive, and that's where Betch will hitch route. Then you get my man Dupree out of Alabama, who I'm a pretty big fan of, really liking him, and kind of like bringing Stool. That was another guy that I considered an honorable mention. I didn't have Dupree that high up because of some of the limitations I thought within his route running, but this was a guy that again made flash plays kind of throughout the week. Here and there he would kind of pop a little bit, and then again in this game he showed up. He had that seam grab from Hennigan, which was a very nice anticipation throw, hit the seam, made a fantastic fantastic grab, and it just rolled from there. You had Besh again, and then you had Hunter underneath, and it was just a quickness to get the ball out. Hennigan's the guy I'm kind of circling as we go forward with this entire quarterback group. I thought he was super fun to watch. And Castro came back, gets the pass breakup. They try to flat route to Dupree, which again, that's where he's limited. They get the pass breakup, but it's finished off by, again, I thought Hennigan just being patient, right? Continuing to work out on the sprint rollout. He continues to work, doesn't force it, lets it kind of develop, and then he throws it underneath. Besh scores the touchdown, and you can see Darius Alexander was almost out there to make the play, but that was a fantastic way to end the game. It was truly amazing to see it kind of end like that. We didn't see a lot of guys, today, but you had guys like Azarie Thomas. I know we messed his name up a ton. I'm still probably messing up out of Florida State, who I thought put together his best day by far. And that day 3, that we got to see at practice, he was fantastic that day. But I think a lot of things carried over, like Tafanu being really nice, Oladejo, who really kind of came along as the week went on, Nicholas Martin as a pass coverage backer, that's kind of his thing. He was outstanding in one-on-ones. I thought he had by far like the best drill out of maybe any player at this point, just one on one, just in coverage, just pass breakup after pass breakup over and over. It was fantastic to watch him just go to work. I thought Millam had a really nice block within, the practice week that kind of springboarded a big run, which was good because I thought it was a little bit down throughout the week, but there was high expectations coming in. But to see things like that go under the radar, you got to point him out as a left guard, set up a really nice seal block, sprung it into the second level, and then again, you had a guy like Restrepo who, we saw some of the limitations. We know where he's not going to be great, but I thought he made a fantastic catch specifically today in the game. It was like a 3rd down to 6. Ball was kind of off, and for a guy that doesn't have like a huge catch radius, goes out there, plucks it off his side, gets him close to a first down conversion, and then again, I think that's where it got stuffed because they had a broken play the very next play. But overall, man, the Senior Bowl was absolutely a success in my eyes. It was a ton of fun. It was great because even though I know that from content perspective, it'd be a little bit difficult, it is a foundation for me as we get to all this draft conversation. And going forward, my plan is to do these draft profile videos as often as possible, like I did today for Darius Stewart. So if you want to support that, man, go ahead. I'm just going to be dropping draft prospect videos. That's my plan. We'll see if things change. I will let you know. But for now, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Pride, for watching, and I'm out.